Shadow Hack. Chapter 691, The Blacksmith's Workhop in the Lower Level. Missen disdainfully looked at Li Yunmu and said, "Humph, even so, I wouldn't lower myself like you and sell my body." "I sold my body, but what relation does it have with you? Why are you so concerned about me? I am only someone whom you wanted to kill, and now you are saying this to me? Given your temperament, you shouldn't be concerned about me. My life and death have nothing to do with you," Li Yunmu said indifferently. Missen was startled. At that moment, she recalled how for some reason, she had charged toward the Dragon Silk Palace. Back then, she couldn't help but act like the voice in her heart had told her to. She was completely astonished by Li Yunmu's words and didn't know how to reply to him. I can't stand it." Li Yunmu found her answer quite hilarious and said with a smile, "You can't stand it? Your underworld serpent has done so many vicious things in the western region, but you surprisingly can't endure seeing this deal? Who are you trying to fool?" Li Yunmu pushed Missen against a reef, and the distance between the two of them decreased quickly. Miss Anne's heart was jumping, and she quickly looked away, not wanting to let Li Yunmu see that she was nervous. But Li Yunmu chose that moment to whisper in her ears. "Could it be that Dragon Lady's words are true and you like me? She is a woman, so she should be able to understand your actions." Seeing Li Yunmu pressing closer and closer to her, Missen felt that she was suffocating and promptly pushed him away. "I don't," she said loudly. After shouting, she rushed toward her room. Her mind was in a complete mess, and her heartbeat was so loud that even she could hear it. She swallowed and muttered to herself, "What am I doing? Why is my heart so difficult to calm?" Li Yunmu looked at Miss Anne's departing figure and said with a slight smile, "Then you don't need to bother with me and the Dragon Lady. Wait until the waiver boat is finished, then we will leave immediately. Naturally, you can also choose to remain here and not come with me. Up to you. You have the freedom to come and go as you please. If you aren't busy, it would be great if you checked the situation of the waiver boat. Our aim is to leave this place and proceed toward the ancient lands." Missen snorted but didn't say anything. Li Yunmu's words were correct. Whoever Li Yunmu slept with had nothing to do with her. She was someone who wanted to survive in the eastern domain by relying on Li Yunmu after losing the underworld serpent. She didn't have the courage to tell him her feelings. She took a deep breath. Her next priority was to go to the lower layer of Dragon Silk Palace and inquire about the condition of the waiver boat. In short, she had decided that leaving the Dragon Silk Palace as quickly as possible was the best choice. Although she didn't know why Li Yunmu was so anxious to leave, she didn't want to see him coming and going out of the Dragon Silk Palace every day. When she saw Li Yunmu follow the Dragon Lady into the inner part of the Dragon Silk Palace, her heart heavy. In order to make sure she didn't have to feel like that any longer, Missen decided that going out to the sea as quickly as possible was for the best, lest undue delay bring other troubles. She arrived at the lower level of the Dragon Silk Palace. It wasn't as majestic as the upper level, but there was a blacksmith workshop there. Weapons were being forged everywhere and modes of transportation were being manufactured. She hadn't seen some of the tools before. The western region was truly far behind the eastern domain. She felt that she was quite inexperienced. The Dragon Silk Palace's blacksmiths kept constantly introducing the new objects to Missen. "I want to ask, how is the manufacturing of the waiver boat going? Considering that you two want to go out to the sea right away, we are trying to build the waiver boat as quickly as possible. Half of it has already been created, so tomorrow you'll probably be able to go out." She could see that the waiver boat was made of wood with a sheet of galvanized iron around it. This made it seem extremely exquisite. Missen walked over and gently caressed the waiver boat. "Will it truly allow us to reach ancient lands in 3 days?" she couldn't help but ask. "In terms of speed, the waiver boat won't lose even to a dragon. If no accident happens, you will be able to reach the ancient lands in 3 days. But this waiver boat is quite frail and must be driven extremely carefully, it can break very easily." If it gets broken, I won't be able to guarantee the 3-day journey. Miss N frowned, not caring too much about the words of the blacksmith. As long as the waiver boat could take them out into the sea, she didn't care about anything else. Then once this waiver boat is created, you mustn't forget to inform us. We have an urgent matter to attend to, so don't delay us. Be assured. Dragon Lady has already explained to us and we will try to build the waiver boat as soon as possible. I guarantee you that my craftsmanship will leave you satisfied. Miss N nodded and began to stroll around the workshop. Suddenly, she discovered an iron sword above the forging platform. It glittered as if eager to fight. This sword seems truly strange. Miss N thought and couldn't help but extend her hand toward it. Girl, don't touch that sword. Without waiting for the craftsman to finish talking, Miss N touched the strange sword. The next moment, countless threads of black energy surrounded her body and Miss Anne's eyes turned pitch black. As if under the invasion of demonic energy, the sword suddenly jumped up, filling the whole sky, and fell into Miss Anne's hands. That blacksmith was slightly startled. The sword was extremely demonic, and he had been ordered by the Dragon Lady to destroy it. Yet the guest who had suddenly appeared at the Dragon Silk Palace had accidentally touched it. This could be considered a big problem. For some reason, a deceitful smile suddenly appeared at the corner of Miss Anne's mouth. The sword in her hand flew out and skewered the blacksmith's chest. The entire workshop was shaken by Miss Anne's loud howl. It sounded like an earthquake had hit the Dragon Silk Palace. Beautiful Silk, who was enjoying the pleasures of intimacy, hurriedly stood up and furiously said, "What's happening? What exactly is going on in the lower layer of Dragon Silk Palace? Come with me." Li Yunmei went after her. He also didn't know the reason behind what seemed to be an earthquake just a moment ago. However, based on how anxious Beautiful Silk was acting, he could guess that it was certainly something bad. Chapter 692, Netherworld Sword. Li Yunmei was following Beautiful Silk out when a guard rushed over to report to her. Bad news, Dragon Lady. Our underground blacksmith workshop has been destroyed. It was that mortal woman who destroyed it. Beautiful Silk glanced at Li Yunmei. Your friend is being impudent. I let it go when she forcefully entered the Dragon Silk Palace, but now she has also destroyed the blacksmith workshop. What exactly does she think she is doing? Beautiful Silk was somewhat furious, and Li Yunmei couldn't offer any explanation for why Miss N would do such a thing. He could only say a few words to appease the woman's anger. Sorry for causing trouble for your Dragon Silk Palace. We should first take a look at what exactly is going on. When they arrived at the blacksmith's workshop at the lower level, they saw that the master blacksmith was lying on the ground with a large hole at the center of his chest. Blood was constantly pouring out of it. Standing in front of them was a woman with a strange smile on her face. There was a unique demonic sword in her hand. Beautiful Silk's pretty eyes went wide, and she said with endless astonishment, "That is Netherworld sword." Li Yunmei couldn't help but ask in bafflement, "What? Don't tell that my friend is being controlled by that sword." Beautiful Silk's complexion turned unsightly. She didn't know how to explain everything to Li Yunmei. Netherworld sword was created by a demonic cultivator. He used 720 types of demonic objects from the eastern domain to refine this sword filled with demonic qi. If someone touches it, they will immediately become a slave to the sword. Your friend is presently in such a situation, and the sword's strength is extremely domineering. 100 years ago, after Dragon King sealed it, this sword suddenly appeared in the vicinity of Dragon Silk Palace. I requested my best blacksmith to completely destroy this sword, but who could have expected that it would surprisingly act up again? I fear that it does not bodes well for our Dragon Silk Palace. Once Netherworld sword appears, the ocean will be completely overturned. Fear flashed across Beautiful Silk's face. She seemed to be terrified of the sword. Based on how demonic it was, Li Yunmei guessed that Miss N was also in danger. The divine Cyan blade showed up in Li Yunmei's hand, unsheathed. A strange smile appeared on Miss Anne's face, who was not far away, when she looked at Li Yunmu. A hint of contempt flashed across her eyes. Clearly, the sword's demonic will did not care for Li Yunmu. His meager strength wasn't enough to place him in its eyes. Li Yunmu's body got covered by metal armor. Even a dragon had suffered a headache fighting him when his body was wrapped in the golden armor, so the demonic sword should also be unable to cleave it open. When Miss Anne saw Li Yunmu taking action, she immediately waved the demonic sword in her hand. Its black sword chi instantly became a wave in the water. When the radiant attack rushed forward, it blew everything away. Even the Dragon Silk Palace's master Beautiful Silk was forced back several meters and coughed out a mouthful of blood. The black sword chi was extremely domineering, since it was refined from demonic treasures. When Li Yunmu's metal armor tried to protect him, it was cleaved apart. Bang! The sharp and clear shattering sound rang out, and the metal armor covering Li Yunmu's body turned into fragments. He could barely believe what he saw. The metal armor had even caused a headache for the dragon, but in front of the demonic sword, it was like a piece of paper. The corners of Miss Anne's mouth bent. She lifted the demonic sword and closed in on Li Yunmu step by step. The system inside Li Yunmu's body gave him a number of warnings. That demonic sword is very formidable and domineering. Even an ancient god-level expert might not be its opponent. Li Yunmu was slightly startled. Then what should be done? We cannot kill it, since if we killed it, then Miss Anne would also be in mortal danger. That Miss Anne is someone from Underworld Serpent, so why do you care if she will live or not? First think about preserving your own little life. She had followed me into the Eastern Domain. Even if previously there were grudges between the two of us, they weren't completely irreconcilable. You are truly kind-hearted. All right then. Help her once for your face. Help her how? Apart from the dark state, there's no way to control the demonic being inside the sword. Your dark state will be able to absorb all the dark attribute energy. But it isn't Western region's dark energy, but rather Eastern Domain's demonic chi. After using dark state, open the fiend origin. Li Yunmu was slightly startled. Fiend origin was the skill which the system had prohibited him from using. But right then, it was requesting him to open it. What exactly did that mean? The system could see that Li Yunmu was unable to understand the reason and patiently explained it. Fiend origin has the ability to restrain all demonic beings. After using it, you can absorb the demonic chi and use it for yourself. But isn't fiend origin excessively domineering, and its side effects? If you want this girl to die, then don't bother using it, the system said. Li Yunmu's heart sank and he furiously said, why not use it? If that demonic being in Miss Anne's body isn't eliminated, it will continue to cause wreckage. It also killed the blacksmith and destroyed the waver boat, so how will we leave the Dragon Silk Palace now? Li Yunmu, who was already short on time, felt anxious. If the demonic being wasn't defeated, it would continue to destroy the Dragon Silk Palace and delaying the day of his departure. This was something that Li Yunmu did not want to see. Since the system had made the suggestion, he couldn't care about the side effects and instantly unleashed the dark state. Fiend origin was also activated when Li Yunmu entered the dark state. However, he lost consciousness during it. He had to completely depend on the system to activate fiend origin. After the dark energy wrapped around his body, it seemed to be even more terrifying that Miss Anne under the control of the demonic being. The dragon lady Beautiful Silk, who had just spat out blood on the side, was startled by the black energy covering Li Yunmu. The mortal also turned out to be a demonic being. His body was covered by dark chi, which the demonic beings liked the most. At first, Beautiful Silk had been concerned. If Li Yunmu was defeated by the demonic being, the entire Dragon Silk Palace would be in peril. However, she would have never guessed that Li Yunmu was also a dangerous person. And she had actually thought of giving birth to his child? If their child turned out to be a demonic being in the future, what could she do? Chapter 693, Absorption of the Demonic Being. After Li Yunmu entered the dark state, the being in the demonic sword became even more excited. It also prompted the first words out of it. "Mortal, I hadn't expected that you would also have fiendish chi. Ha ha ha. I haven't encountered a tasty treat like you in a long time. What do you say about me absorbing you? It won't be very painful." The demonic being suddenly congealed into a human figure and spoke to Li Yunmu while floating above Miss Anne's head. Li Yunmu had lost consciousness by then, however. Regardless of what the demonic being said, he turned a deaf ear toward it. With the divine cyan blade emitting dark energy, he went to attack the demonic being. Their two silhouettes constantly flickered in the underground room, dazzling everyone's eyes. "You mortal, since you have chosen to degrade to the demonic path, why not yield before me?" Li Yunmu struck Netherworld sword again. The demonic being couldn't help but frown at that. It hadn't expected that the mortal controlled by the fiendish chi would be so formidable. When the system saw that the remaining time of the dark state would not be enough, it urged the fiend origin in his body. The blackened parts of Li Yunmu's eyes turned completely black. Dark energy poured out of them and surrounded his body, drowning him. The mass of black chi then rotated like a whirlpool. What's going on? When the demonic being looking at the whirlpool of dark energy surrounding Li Yunmu, its eyes filled with astonishment. While on the other side, beautiful Silk looked at the fountain of dark energy as well. Moments later, she felt her sight turn dark, and she lost consciousness. "It's impossible. Impossible. How could I be absorbed by this mortal? Ha ha ha." The demonic being tried to control its body, but the whirlpool of energy was too domineering. It could no longer control itself. Danti Danti. The demonic being's face was filled with fear and astonishment. Its demonic chi was completely absorbed by the formidable whirlpool, and its body was sucked inside soon after. The demonic being's eyes went wide and it mumbled, This is fiend origin." Its eyes almost bulged out of their sockets, but it was too late for the demonic being to do anything anymore. "Ah!" A shriek echoed through the entire Dragon Silk Palace. The whirlpool had not only absorbed the demonic being, but even the demonic chi of Netherworld sword. Once Li Yunmu's time in the dark state ran out, the fiend origin also vanished. After it went away, Li Yunmu suddenly burst out laughing. His weird expression terrified everyone. None of the shivering marine soldiers who were hiding at the corner dared to get close to Li Yunmu. They all felt that he was a monster and they were just ants in his eyes. If they were the slightest bit careless, they would be immediately crushed by the other party. After the demonic being disappeared from Miss Anne's body, she fell to the ground unconscious. Netherworld sword also stopped glittering and struck the ground with a clang sound. The dark state had disappeared, but Li Yunmu's pitch-black pupils did not return to normal. Apparently the side effects of fiendish energy have already showed up. After that, Li Yunmu also fell on the ground, unconscious. When Li Yunmu woke up, he was back in the Dragon Silk Palace and did not know how many days had passed. He immediately sat up on his bed and nervously said, "Gosh! If we take too much time, it might be too late." "Don't worry, you were only unconscious for a day," the system told him. "Only one day? Impossible. In the past, it had always been 5 days. How could it be just one day this time?" Li Yunmu found it unfathomable. "The master of this Dragon Silk Palace, beautiful Silk, is a loyal woman. Because you helped her conceive a dragon seed, she gave you her inner divine dragon core. That's why you awakened so quickly," the system said indifferently. Inner divine dragon core? She had refined it for several thousand years, how could she be willing to part with it? The system smiled. "This is your field of expertise. I wonder how did you subdue that dragon lady?" Li Yunmu's face turned red, but he didn't say anything. It would be better for him to stay silent about such matters so as to avoid being made fun of by the system. "How is Miss Anne?" In order to make up for her previous offense, she followed the blacksmiths to make the waver boat. It should be about finished by now. Li Yunmu nodded, thinking of leaving the room, but suddenly Netherworld sword fell in front of him. What's going on here? Given your fiend origin, the demonic sword has accepted you as its new master. The only difference is that because the demonic being has been completely absorbed by you, it is no longer able to control its master's body, so you can use it as you wish. Li Yunmu nodded as if he had understood. Since he woke up, he didn't pay any attention to the pitch-black pupils of his eyes which remained from the time he had entered the dark state. It was the side effect the system had mentioned to him before, and it was even more difficult to handle than the dark state's side effect. Maybe he would be swallowed by the fiendish chi one day, and at that time, he would no longer be under the system's control. When it thought about it, the system couldn't help but sigh. It would all depend upon Li Yunmu's luck. Li Yunmu walked to the gate and encountered Beautiful Silk by coincidence. You have woken up. The waver boat has already been finished and is ready to set out. You have woken up just a moment ago, so it would be better for you to rest a bit, she said softly. Li Yunmu gave a profound look to her and said, Many thanks for your inner divine dragon core. It was your lifetime's cultivation. Beautiful Silk smiled slightly at him. It doesn't matter. In any case, soon the master of Dragon Silk Palace will be our child. The two of us could be considered as family, so don't treat me as an outsider. But I am afraid that our child will not be different from you and will be a demonic being. Li Yunmu repeatedly shook his head. You don't need to worry. He will absolutely not be influenced by it. I swear to you. Seeing Li Yunmu making such a vow, Beautiful Silk calmed her heart down. Still, she could not help but add a few words. The reason why I gave you my inner divine dragon core wasn't to quicken your recovery, but rather to suppress that demonic being inside your body. I don't want my child's father to become a demonic cultivator who collects the fiendish chi of the world. Upon hearing Beautiful Silk's words, Li Yunmu nodded and said, Regardless of your reason, you still have my gratitude. After I leave, who knows when will we see each other again? Chapter 694, Setting Out on a Journey. You already have the treasure pearl, right? In the future, if you want to meet me, you can use the treasure pearl to enter the Dragon Silk Palace, said Beautiful Silk. Li Yunmu nodded. The waver boat was finally ready to set sail because of the assistance of Missen. But Beautiful Silk was somewhat reluctant to part with him. After enjoying the intimacy of a couple for 2 days, she was unable to forget him. While gazing at the waver boat getting farther away, she stroked her abdomen and said, In the future, you will become the master of Dragon Silk Palace. As the waver boat sailed through the sea, Missen appeared comparably more excited. The waver boat's speed was very fast, and both of them could enjoy the scenery of the ocean. Finally we escaped from those guys. Why exactly did you lose consciousness? And who was it that destroyed the blacksmith's workshop? Why don't I remember anything? Li Yunmu faintly smiled and said, I also don't remember. Hadn't I also lost consciousness? He gave a bare minimum explanation of the whole affair while the system went dormant for the time being. If it was not for its suggestion earlier, Miss Anne's life would have been in true danger before. Somehow it happened that he had once again rescued Miss Anne's life. Why the hell are you looking at me like that? Humph. Missen felt the warmth in Li Yunmu's gaze and quickly shook him by the shoulders. Li Yunmu promptly withdrew his gaze and mumbled, Nothing, I just felt that when you smile, you look quite pretty. Missen was slightly startled, and her face instantly turned red. She hadn't thought that Li Yunmu would become so charming when he talked silly like that. No wonder an elegant woman like the Dragon Lady had feelings toward him. But when she thought about his words, she recalled that she indeed hadn't smiled in a long time. From the day Underworld Serpent was established, she had been busy every day and had forgotten the feeling of being happy from the bottom of her heart. However, after interacting with Li Yunmu for a few days, she had gradually come to feel a hint of joy in her heart. That joy had completely vanished after the relationship between Li Yunmu and the Dragon Lady was established, but after the demonic being invaded her body and Li Yunmu absorbed it, she lost a portion of her memories. They were precisely the ones from what happened after they entered the Dragon Silk Palace. After they disappeared, Miss Anne's impression toward Li Yunmu wasn't only limited to his and the Dragon Lady's entanglement. Miss Anne coughed 2 times and said in a soft voice, "Who knows whether you are saying the truth or not? I have to tell you that we are a single man and a single woman traveling together on a waiver boat. You don't you think of overstepping your bounds?" When she said those words, actually another scene had taken form in her mind, and at the bottom of her heart, a hint of thirst and expectation was born. But it was impossible for her to display them in front of a man. Li Yunmu only understood Miss Anne's surface actions and said in earnestness, "Don't worry, I definitely wouldn't do anything to overstep my bounds. I am an honorable man." Miss Anne snorted at him. "Hey, I haven't asked you until now, but what's you aim for going to the Eastern Domain? I can't always follow you, right? What if you're going to attempt something dangerous? I don't want to follow you in throwing my life away. I have only come to the Eastern Domain to evade the hunt for the time being. I am going to the Eastern Domain to find the ancient secret method to save my world." After interacting with Miss Anne for the last couple days, Li Yunmu felt that she was a good and honest person. Although when she had been the leader of Underworld Serpent she had acted in an evil manner, she was a woman. Such characteristics were something that all women should have. Crafty and unruly, willful, domineering, delicate. Li Yunmu looked in the direction in which Waiver Boat was moving and said, "It's quite likely that after we reach the ancient lands, we will have to part ways because this matter is very dangerous. I think it would be better to not involve you." Li Yunmu's words caused Miss Anne to suddenly have a strange feeling in her heart. The travel with him was the most relaxed and happy period in her life. Although they had went through many dangerous experiences, they had turned into friends during them. She had always been under great pressure when she was at Underworld Serpent. But after meeting Li Yunmu, she had become much more optimistic. "And then we will each go our way in the ancient lands. In any case, I intend to live in the Eastern Domain for the time being, so you can go and find your ancient secret method. I am too lazy to care about you." After Miss Anne finished speaking, she leaned her head against the wall of the waiver boat. Her thoughts were floating far away, and she felt a hint of despair in her heart. Li Yunmu was also actually reluctant in his heart. Once he thought about the time when the waiver boat reached the ancient lands and they would have to part ways, he began to pray in his heart that the boat would go slower. He wanted for them to have at least a little bit more time together. However, the waiver boat's speed was really fast, just as the Dragon Lady had said. Like a dragon traveling through the sea, they closed in on the ancient lands in no time. The two people had gone to rest for the time being when a loud bang suddenly echoed through the boat. It woke both of them up. Miss Anne leapt up and cried out in fear. "What happened?" Li Yunmu observed their surroundings through the window. What made him anxious was that the waiver boat had knocked against a reef, unable to proceed forward. "An accident, the waiver boat has been ruined." Miss Anne went to stand on the deck and frowned. "Can't you even watch the direction? Now that the waiver boat is ruined, how will we continue moving toward the ancient lands? Don't you want to obtain the ancient secret method?" Although Miss Anne seemed to be reprimanding Li Yunmu, flowers were blooming in her heart. If the waiver boat couldn't proceed forward, she could continue spending time with Li Yunmu, they wouldn't have to part ways just yet. Li Yunmu was much more anxious compared to Miss Anne upon realizing that the waiver boat was broken. His plan to reach the ancient lands would be greatly delayed, and the danger to his world would increase greatly. Perhaps Miss Anne wasn't worried, but he truly couldn't wait. Li Yunmu and Miss Anne went out of the waiver boat to check the situation. Outside, they confirmed that the waiver boat truly couldn't be used anymore. When they reached the surface of the sea, they saw an island not far away. Many native villagers on it had gathered together and were looking at them like they had seen monsters. "What is this place? Li Yunmu slowly reached the island with Misan. Wouldn't it be better to ask them? Chapter 695, Fusang People. Li Yunmu went to speak with the native Icelanders. Do you know what this place is? This is the Eastern Ocean. Where did you two come from? Li Yunmu's eyes went wide open. They had surprisingly reached the Eastern Ocean? On Earth, wasn't the Eastern Sea the same as East China Sea occupied by the Japanese? But the Japanese were no good. Thinking of this, Li Yunmu nodded and said, Do you know where the ancient lands are? The Icelanders suspiciously shook their head, which gave Li Yunmu a headache. If they got lost, how would he have to proceed toward the ancient lands? At that moment, the system woke up and displayed a map in Li Yunmu's mind. This is a map of the Eastern Domain. Li Yunmu rolled his eyes when he saw the map. Hey, how could you screw up so easily? Why didn't you give it to me in the water? If you had given it to me earlier, when we were in the ocean, there wouldn't have been any problem with the waiver boat. I was unable to sense the surroundings in the ocean, so how could I give it to you? On the land, I can gather the data and make a map of the nearby places. When Li Yunmu took a better look at the system's map, he was gobsmacked. Crap! We have been fooled. The Dragon Silk Palace is clearly quite close to the ancient lands, so why did she say that it is a month away? The system was indifferent to his shock. If she hadn't said that, how would you have agreed to her condition? We have clearly been moving in the opposite direction. This is the Eastern Ocean, so fortunately the waiver boat got ruined, otherwise, we might have even reached the western region. Once Li Yunmu thought about how the dragon lady had cheated him, he became angry. So what should we do now? We are so far from the destination that I don't even know what to do. Don't be anxious. You still have a way. I marked the path on the map, so you only need to walk along it. There shouldn't be any problems with it. Li Yunmu glanced at the path on the map. If he wanted to reach the ancient lands, his journey would be filled with hardships. This is the only way. It was impossible to take the same road back, so they could only take the route given by the system. Just when Li Yunmu decided to leave the Eastern Ocean and advance in the northern direction to begin his journey, two groups of armed horsemen appeared. They surrounded him and Misan. Who are you people? You surprisingly dare to enter the territory of Fusang. If you harmed the Icelanders, you will be shot and killed. Li Yunmu was slightly startled, and he cursed in his heart. What are these ghosts? They surprisingly dare to attack me and Misan? He could endure the insults of the leader of horsemen for the time being, but Misan did not. She unsheathed her sword at the speed of a thunderbolt, and the leader's head fell on the ground. In an instant, he died a miserable death. All the onlookers shuddered from head to toe upon seeing it. The horsemen revealed terrified expressions and knelt on the ground after witnessing Miss Anne's terrifying strength. The Fusang people constantly shouted, "Spare our life, God! Spare our life, God!" Li Yunmu laughed. The moment Miss Anne revealed her ability, the Icelanders surprisingly began to worship them as gods. With that being the case, he and Miss Anne could turn into their god. The Icelanders appeared to be extremely devout and were constantly kowtowing toward Miss Anne. She coldly snorted and said, "Truly reckless people. You surprisingly dared to be rampant in front of this miss, your pathetic lives will be the price for that." Li Yunmu suddenly felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The woman beside him was truly terrifying. He could not provoke her under any circumstances. If he did it, he would just be courting trouble. After Miss Anne attacked, the stupid Fusang people began to worship her as a god. In the eyes of Fusang people, the two strangers had become high-level gods. When warriors who held administrative authority arrived where the gods had appeared, they saw the Fusang people kneeling in front of Li Yunmu and Miss Anne in worship. The general of administration Jiro Okamoto wasn't the least bit convinced and said in a rage, "What are you all doing? This old man is the god. You are making my people worship you, do you want to die?" The warriors lifted their blades and surrounded Li Yunmu and Missen in a way that not even a drop could trickle through. These Fusang people are truly reckless, even daring to provoke two people who are on the verge of breaking through into God realm. Since they want to die, I will help them. Dealing with the ordinary warriors without waiting for Li Yunmu to attack was a very simple matter for Missen. With a slight wave of her hand, the warriors instantly fell on the ground. Seeing her terrifying strength, the general of administration immediately threw himself on the ground in fright. He had the strength of ordinary people only, so no wonder that the Icelanders were sincerely kowtowing in front of the strangers. Jiro Okamoto knelt on the ground and paid his respects to Missen and Li Yunmu like the other Icelanders. When Missen saw this scene, she nodded and said, "These people can be regarded as tactful. What do you plan to do next?" The waiver boat had been ruined, so if they wanted to proceed toward the ancient lands, it would be extremely difficult. Not to mention that not only did Li Yunmu not know the location of the ancient lands, even the native islands did not know where it was. Li Yunmu looked at the map inside his mind and said, "We will move toward the north. Let's go." Just as the two of them were going to leave, the Icelanders barred their path. They held onto their feet, not letting go. "Well, aren't these Fusang people energetic? This miss will exterminate them today." Missen with her fiery temper could no longer be bothered by the Fusangs. She was about to attack when one of Icelanders began to speak. "God, I have a request. Please save the children of our nation. There is a large snake inside the Yamata river. Every year, it comes and eats the young children of our village. We're been brought to the verge of disaster because of this monster. Heavenly God, we request that you get rid of this monster and return peace to this island." The Icelanders were very sincere and didn't seem to be telling lies, which caused Li Yunmu and Missen to hesitate slightly. The problem was that they didn't know the origin of the snake or its level of strength. If it were a divine beast, they would have little chance to win against it. Chapter 696, The Snake of Yamata River. These Icelanders are too pitiful. How about you help them? Li Yunmu almost spat on the ground. When did Miss N's temperament change? Was she not the female devil of the underworld serpent who didn't hesitate to use any means to accomplish her goals regardless of how vicious it was? When did she turn into such a good-natured woman? Haven't you always been a villain? How come you suddenly want to help others? I cannot erase my past actions, but can't I turn over a new leaf? Missen snorted, then added, "They all consider this miss a god, so for this title, this miss has to do something, doesn't she? Otherwise won't everyone feel that our title as gods isn't as reputed as it appears?" Li Yunmu nodded and said, "Your words have reason. With that being the case, we will assist these Icelanders in getting rid of the snake." When they reached the Yamata River, they saw pitch-black water and found it quite strange. All the villages in the vicinity stayed away, no one wanting to have any contact with the snake. After a while, there was movement in the river. Turbulent winds caused great waves on the surface of the river. "It has arrived," Li Yunmu said gloomily. Pang! A stream of water from the Yamata River charged into the sky, and an enormous snake with 8 heads appeared in front of Li Yunmu and Missen. The instant Missen saw the 8-headed snake, she was frightened out of her wits. The snake was so vicious that she could instantly tell that it was an ancient devil beast. The battle between her and the Kun had been extremely strenuous, so when faced with the 8-headed snake, she knew that she wasn't its opponent. Missen patted Li Yunmu's shoulder and said in deadly earnestness, "I will hand it over to you. You are the only hope of the Icelanders. You don't intend to fight it?" Li Yunmu rolled his eyes. "The villagers have such high expectations for you and you surprisingly intend to run away from the fight. Who intends to flee? This is just a strategic retreat, you understand." When Missen spoke, she felt a little bit guilty. After seeing Li Yunmu cast a disdainful gaze toward her, she instantly put on a brave front. You go first. I will follow behind you." While the two people were chatting, the eight-headed snake opened its mouth and began to talk. You two are the offerings for this great snake today. She took a sniff, then suddenly frowned. Which village's offering are you? Why aren't you a virgin male? When the eight-headed great snake looked at Li Yunmu, its eyes were filled with hostility. Clearly, the snake took great offense to the matter of Li Yunmu not being a virgin, which would influence the taste of its meal. When its gaze fell on Misson, it suddenly opened its bloody mouth wide and said, "But this virgin woman should be a delicacy." When the eight-headed great snake attacked Misson with its mouth wide open, Li Yunmu immediately chopped off one of its heads with his divine cyan blade. Yet the next moment, the head regrew and attained its original size in the blink of an eye. Misson was quite shocked by the eight-headed great snake's attack, but fortunately she was saved in time by Li Yunmu. You snake surprisingly dare to eat this miss. This miss will stake her all against you. Misson lifted her long sword and rushed toward the eight-headed great snake. Since it wanted to eat her, she had to fight back. You even dare to eat this miss, I see that you don't want to live, snake. Li Yunmu and Misson joined hands to deal with eight-headed great snake. They fought it in the air while the Icelanders underneath could see them clearly. When the eight-headed great snake was suppressed by the two gods who descended from heaven, the people of Fusang tribe began to celebrate and applaud. Hearing the cheers of villagers, Misson and Li Yunmu's moves became even more nimble and their speed increased greatly. Soon, the eight-headed great snake became unable to resist their attacks. The villagers constantly cheered for them, because Misson and Li Yunmu were their only hope to get rid of the calamity. Best of luck, gods! Li Yunmu suddenly passed the Netherworld sword to Misson and shouted, "Use this sword to chop off its head." Misson took the Netherworld sword, and for some reason, her strength began to merge with the weapon. Could she have been approved by the Netherworld sword? It had been obtained from the Dragon Silk Palace, and because of it, she had lost consciousness, which created a connection between her and the weapon. Misson brandished the Netherworld sword. One of the heads of the eight-headed great snake were instantly chopped off, and the snake groaned. You aren't this island's people? Why are you assisting them? Even if you chop off my heads, they will regrow. Just when the eight-headed great snake began to feel complacent, its chopped-off head was unable to regrow. The snake was startled, finding it impossible. It had an inherent regenerative power, so how could it suddenly become unable to regrow its heads? The divine cyan blade in Li Yunmu's hand turned into a green snake and tightly locked the body of the eight-headed great snake. Underneath, the Icelanders were looking at him and Misson with astonished gazes, cheering them with all their hearts. Heavenly gods have succeeded. They subdued the eight-headed great snake. The two heavenly gods are extremely ferocious. From now on, we will worship them as our Fusang tribe's protector gods. Long live Fusang! Long live heavenly gods! While the Icelanders got extremely excited, the eight-headed great snake suddenly said, "Do you think that chopping off my heads would exterminate me? Ha ha ha, too naive! I am undead! Undead!" Upon hearing the words of the eight-headed great snake, Li Yunmu indifferently said, "Since you are unable to die, then we will seal you for eternity." At some point in time, a mirror had appeared in Li Yunmu's hand. It was given to him by the system, and its function was to seal all demonic beings in the world. The eight-headed large snake who had been destroying people's lives for years could finally be dealt with. Li Yunmu caught the reflection of the eight-headed great snake in the mirror, and the snake instantly turned into a ball of black air. It was sucked into the mirror with a miserable shout, and the great snake could be seen on its surface. Li Yunmu pulled back the mirror and coldly snorted. There are many methods to deal with you without needing to kill you. Chapter 697, Nine-Tailed Divine Fox. Right after Li Yunmu spoke, a Megatama 1 fell at the place where the eight-headed great snake had disappeared. Li Yunmu caught it in the air with the divine cyan blade. The bead should have been in the body of the eight-headed great snake. While thinking about it, Li Yunmu returned to the villagers with Misson. The villagers all knelt down on the ground. Their leader then spoke to Li Yunmu and Misan respectfully. Glory to the two gods, we hope that you two will continue protecting our Fusang tribe for eternity. After Li Yunmu and Misan received the respect of the Icelanders, a shrine was built to worship the two of them. They were great heroes who had defeated the eight-headed great snake and for that received the faith of the Fusang tribe. In the villagers' eyes, their status was even higher than that of the imperial soldiers. Li Yunmu and Misan were enjoying their lives of immortals on an island in the Eastern Ocean when a white light suddenly descended above the shrine. A woman wearing white clothes landed on the ground. When she saw Li Yunmu and Misan asleep inside the shrine, she began to scowl. Who exactly are they? Why are they bewitching my followers? Li Yunmu was a light sleeper, so when he heard speaking, he immediately went on alert. Who? Who is in the main hall? Li Yunmu's shout woke Misan, and she promptly sat up in the bed. We are gods of here, who are you? Why have you come to the shrine? The woman wearing the white dress sighed and said, You are blaspheming against the goddess of this place, me, and trying to snatch my position. Today I will dye this hall with your blood so the Fusang tribe can see your true colors. Haha, you are a god? Then what have you done for Fusang tribe? The eight-headed great snake had become a calamity for them, but you as a god just kept on watching? If it were not for us, who would have brought peace and security to this island? Misan coldly snorted. She didn't have any favorable opinion of the woman in the white dress standing in front of them. The white-dressed woman did not stay quiet. The world of gods has its own rules, so how could we casually assist them in surviving a calamity? It would be going against the natural order and would cause us to receive heavenly punishment. Ha ha ha, you gods are truly selfish. Just to avoid the heavenly punishment, you let mortals suffer, then why should they worship you? You two are just swindlers who know some magic. Today, I will definitely reveal your true colors. Li Yunmu took a step forward and said, You said you are Fusang tribe's guardian spirit, but are you really a god? The white-dressed woman lifted her head. I am the nine-tailed divine fox, the guardian spirit of Fusang tribe. Misan couldn't help but sneer at her words. So aren't you just a divine beast that claims itself to be a god? You are inferior to a true god. You. Gods will assist mortals and will take the sufferings of mortals on themselves. But you divine beasts won't understand that. I said, we gods have our own rules. I won't talk nonsense with you, it'd be better to kill you and use your blood to wash this shrine. The nine-tailed divine fox suddenly revealed her 9 tails like a fan behind her. Li Yunmu narrowed his eyes, and the divine cyan blade left his hand. It began to circle around the 9-tailed divine fox. If the divine beast chose to attack, then the divine cyan blade would definitely make all effort to obstruct her. Instead, a blue pearl appeared in the hand of the 9-tailed divine fox. It advanced toward Li Yunmu and exploded. If the pearl hadn't been obstructed by the divine cyan blade, its attack would have reached Li Yunmu. Misan raised the Netherworld sword and thrust toward a vital organ, but it was stopped by one of the 9-tailed divine fox's tails. They fluttered continuously until they flung Misan away. When Misan was ruthlessly knocked against the shrine wall and even spat out blood, Li Yunmu knew that the 9-tailed divine fox wasn't easy to deal with. Its strength quickly reached ancient god level. Although Li Yunmu's strength right then was sufficient to defeat an ancient god, battling a divine beast was extremely strenuous. Misan proved to be slightly weaker in front of the divine beast, for which she was instantly targeted. Accept your death. Red suddenly flickered across the 9-tailed divine fox's eyes, and countless beams of red light from her body. They bode ill for Misan and Li Yunmu. They were instantly engulfed by the hegemonic red light. Dust rose in the shrine, and the 9-tailed divine fox snorted before turning around to leave. Although the strangers showed up to be somewhat more formidable than ordinary people, there was still a large disparity between them and true gods. You think that you can kill us with such an attack? Li Yunmu's voice echoed in the shrine, causing the 9-tailed divine fox's complexion to change instantly. She had used her full strength in that attack, so no one besides true gods should have been able to survive it. She had wanted to kill Li Yunmu and Missen in one go and had even considered the possibility that they would be able to stop her attack. They were truly formidable. It finally aroused her battle intent. Metal armor was wrapped up Li Yunmu, who suddenly advanced toward the nine-tailed divine fox. He launched a punch with enough power to shake mountains, instantly throwing the nine-tailed divine fox away. When she stabilized herself, her eyes were filled with astonishment. His strength, how could it be so formidable? He seemed to be completely different from a swindler who could only use some magic. The strength of the two strangers surpassed the power than any human could possess, quickly approaching the realm of gods. Blood seeped out of the corners of the nine-tailed divine fox's mouth. You are playing with fire and asking to be burnt. Then let's see whether you have the power to defeat me or not. After saying that, Li Yunmu almost used his full strength. Their figures flashed in the hall, and soon, the nine-tailed divine fox no longer able to defend itself, which left her incomparably astonished. Could it be that the more that human fought the stronger he became? She was 100% certain that he wasn't an ordinary powerhouse, but that his strength had already come close to the realm of gods. Li Yunmu smiled slightly and said, "If I didn't have to protect anyone, you would have been defeated a long time ago. It would be better for you to surrender now. You gods don't want to act and remain as spectators when devils kill mortals, but you do your best to exterminate those who stand on their side? What sort of logic is that?" Chapter 698, Seal. The gaze of the nine-tailed divine fox became extremely ruthless, because in front of her a mortal was disrespecting gods. Moreover, as the guardian god of Fusang tribe, she couldn't allow Li Yunmu to continue bewitching her people. "Shut up, you mortal! You don't have the qualifications to find faults with the gods." Li Yunmu used his divine cyan blade to defend against another attack of the nine-tailed divine fox. "Then what qualifications do you have as a god to casually kill people?" The nine-tailed divine fox didn't care about anything Li Yunmu said. Using its 9 tails as weapons, she unleashed a fierce offense. But Li Yunmu moved quickly, rays of light constantly blossoming from his metal armor. Missen, who had been slightly injured by the nine-tailed divine fox's attack, lay still for a time. However, when she saw Li Yunmu having some trouble in the fight with the nine-tailed divine fox, she rushed to his side. "I can assist you. She isn't suitable to be a god. She doesn't care about the life or death of those Icelanders outside." Miss Anne's words caused a peculiar sensation to pass through the eyes of the nine-tailed divine fox. The two humans only knew to enrage the gods. Yet why would they choose to rebel and court death if they knew the consequences of their actions? The nine-tailed divine fox took a deep breath. Even if the mortals possessed guts, hoping to defeat her was just overestimating their limits. Missen didn't care about the attitude of the nine-tailed divine fox toward them and continuously thrust the Netherworld sword toward the nine-tailed divine fox. If the nine-tailed divine fox was only against Li Yunmu, she might still be able to win, but after Missen joined in and the two of them began to attack together, the nine-tailed divine fox began to panic. The two humans were half-step gods, and the nine-tailed divine fox was at most a divine beast, which meant she was inferior to ancient gods. While fighting against the nine-tailed divine fox, Li Yunmu didn't use his full strength. If he did, his strength would be equally matched with the weakest of ancient gods. If he were to enter the dark state, then he could even fight against several ancient god-level powerhouses, with his strength almost reaching master god level. Missen had firm belief in Li Yunmu's ability, but the nine-tailed divine fox in front of them was truly troublesome. With their teamwork, they had forced her into the corner, but she was still not convinced and wanted to fight them to the death. The battle continued for a whole day. The heaven and earth changed colors, and gloom filled the entire world. In time, the shrine itself collapsed without anything being settled. It startled the Fusang tribe. They had personally witnessed the nine-tailed divine fox, whom they had worshipped until then, surprisingly engage in battle with the two gods who had helped seal the 8-headed great snake. Many people thought that they were mistaken, but after some confirmation, they became sure that their eyes were not deceiving them. Fusang tribesmen knelt on the ground and constantly kowtowed, facing upwards and howling in grief as if accusing the heavens of being unfair. The nine-tailed divine fox, the two gods descended from the heavens and sealed the eight-headed snake. They are gods in our eyes, our heroes, so you cannot act like this toward them. Yes. Nine-tailed divine fox, you shouldn't injure our benefactors, who have shown kindness toward us. We request that you let them go. The eight-headed great snake was a natural calamity, and if these gods hadn't descended, our Fusang tribe would have never regained its peace. We request nine-tailed divine fox to let them go. Upon hearing the requests of Fusang tribe to let the two mortals go, the nine-tailed divine fox was startled. She had never anticipated that the mortals would have such high prestige in the eyes of the Icelanders whom she had been protecting until then. Misson lifted her sword and pointed at the nine-tailed divine fox. Are you hearing everyone's cheers? If you continue to go against everyone's wishes, you won't be suitable to be their god. As a god, if you can't bring blessings to the common people, then what use are you? Li Yunmu said indifferently. The nine-tailed divine fox took a deep breath and withdrew her 9 tails. She coldly looked at Li Yunmu and said, "What method did you two use to bewitch my people?" Bewitch? You see the Fusang tribe which you protect, do they seem bewitched? They spontaneously joined together to defend us. I am afraid that they can no longer accept you doing nothing. The nine-tailed divine fox snorted coldly and said with some unwillingness, I have been protecting these people for an eternity, but in the end, it still resulted in me becoming the villain. Then why didn't you take care of the eight-headed great snake? The reason why the ordinary people abandoned you is because you were unable to solve their difficulties. The nine-tailed divine fox lowered her head and said after a moment of silence, Humph, that eight-headed great snake, I couldn't deal with it. The nine-tailed divine fox didn't know what to say. Right then, however, she suddenly saw the Megatama which had appeared in Li Yunmu's hand at some point in time, and her face instantly lost all color. Ah! 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 Misson and Li Yunmu looked at each other. Had the nine-tailed divine fox gone crazy? Why had she suddenly begun shrieking? Keep that thing away from me! Li Yunmu lifted up the Megatama, which had fallen out from the body of the eight-headed great snake and which seemed like a treasure. The nine-tailed divine fox shuddered while watching it, unable to retain its clear mind. I request you, please keep that Megatama away from me. Li Yunmu was slightly startled. Could the bead be the reason why the nine-tailed divine fox was unable to subdue the eight-headed great snake? It was actually because the snake had something which frightened the nine-tailed divine fox. Li Yunmu brushed the Megatama with his finger, and a white light covered the sky. The nine-tailed divine fox shrieked at the sight of it and was instantly absorbed by the bead. While tightly holding the Megatama, Li Yunmu narrowed his eyes and said to Misson, could it be that this Megatama can seal the nine-tailed divine fox? It would explain why she wasn't an opponent to the eight-headed great snake. It was simply afraid of the treasure that could seal her. Tomorrow, we will leave this island and travel toward Central Emperor Mountain. From it, we will get closer and closer to ancient lands. Then what about the Fusang tribe? I have already sealed the divine beasts, so they only need to worship them like they have worshipped us. On the next day, Li Yunmu arrived in front of the Fusang tribe holding the Megatama and the mirror. The shrine has been destroyed and we will also leave this place. Who is the head of your Fusang tribe? Come out and meet me, I have an important matter to declare. Chapter 699, Origin of the Three Treasures. A youth stepped out from the Fusang tribe's people and walked to stand in front of Li Yunmu. He bowed and said, Gods, what are your instructions? Li Yunmu gave him the Megatama and the mirror to him and said with a faint smile, we cannot continue staying here. These two items will guard the peace of your tribe. Gods, must you both leave? You cannot abandon our Fusang tribe. What if some creature like the eight-headed great snake appears again? Li Yunmu sighed. Actually, I am not a god. I am the same as you, only a mortal. And right now, I have a very important matter to attend to, so I must leave. The eyes of everyone in the Fusang tribe filled with despair, but they had no way out. After all, they could do nothing about the decisions of gods. No, don't say that you are not gods. You are our gods, the eternal benefactors of the Fusang tribe. If you truly consider us as your eternal benefactors, then do as we say. The leader of the tribe received the mirror and the Megatama while choking with emotion. These are the gifts of the gods. From now on, they will be called Yata no Kagami and Yasakani no Magatama. Misan smiled faintly. Since he gifted you the two treasures, I will also give you a present. This sword will be my gift. Henceforth, it will be the symbol of your tribe's dominance. When Misan presented the Netherworld sword, the people of Fusang tribe were full of excitement for having received a treasure. Many thanks to the two gods. Our Fusang tribe will take care of them as long we live. Li Yunmu sighed and muttered apprehensively, if it wasn't for them worshipping us as gods, I wouldn't have bothered with the life and death of the Fusang tribe. The leader of the Fusang tribe took the sword and said with excitement, this sword will be called Kusanagano in the future and will be the symbol of gods. That was the origin of the three sacred treasures, but no one knew that an 8-headed great snake was sealed inside the Yata no Kagami while a 9-tailed divine fox was sealed inside the Yasakani no Magatama. Several hundred years later, the two sacred treasures were still in conflict with each other, because the divine beast and the devil beast sealed inside them could not accept the other. Because of the three treasures, the Fusang tribe sunk into constant battle. It divided into various factions which kept warring among themselves to obtain the three sacred treasures. Naturally, there were even some crazy people who surprisingly wanted to unseal the 8-headed great snake from the Yata no Kagami to continue wreaking havoc in the human world. Thus, after the departure of Li Yunmu and Misan, the Fusang tribe's life became much more chaotic. Li Yunmu led Misan through difficult terrain toward the central Emperor Mountain. If nothing went wrong, they would soon enter the ancient lands. The entrance was the Crow Soul Valley. It was the gateway to the ancient lands which had been guarded for many generations. Li Yunmu and Misan reached the end of Crow Soul Valley, where lay the entrance to the central Emperor Mountain. It was covered by thousands of miles of snow, which reminded Li Yunmu of the land of ice. There was a secret power in the central Emperor Mountain known as Feixue Sect. They were the hegemons of the central Emperor Mountain for many years, and the countless beasts and monsters of the central Emperor Mountain bowed their heads in front of them. None of them dared to act recklessly. When Li Yunmu and Misan suddenly entered the central Emperor Mountain, several pairs of eyes focused their attention on them. Are they not afraid of death, surprisingly daring to charge into the central Emperor Mountain? They are only two humans. Quickly report to senior apprentice sister that strangers have intruded. We need to teach them a lesson. Li Yunmu and Misan were walking forward, leaving fresh tracks on the snow. It was an extremely beautiful sight. Is this truly the way to the ancient lands? Are you sure that you aren't mistaken? Misan looked at Li Yunmu with suspicion. She was wearing a cloak which wasn't able to stop the cold. The snow on the central Emperor Mountain was a little excessive, chilling her to the bone. Li Yunmu was more intelligent than Misan and had prepared some warm clothes beforehand. Misan was constantly rubbing her hands and taking deep breaths. The bitter cold was even more intense than in the land of ice. As the snow continued falling from the sky, a few figures could be seen flying on a sword. They moved toward them and descended on the ground once they got close. Who are you people? Why have you intruded upon our central Emperor Mountain? This isn't a place you can enter at will. Misan curled her lips. Who are you? What's the problem with us coming here? We can't come? This isn't your territory. A beautiful woman took a step forward with a cold and detached expression on her face. This is the territory of Feixue Sect. Did you two perhaps take a wrong path? Even with that being the case, don't blame our Feixue Sect for being impolite, she said indifferently. When Misan saw that the people before them were being unreasonable, she pulled out her sword and furiously said, "You unreasonable people, do you want to fight? Then come." Li Yunmu promptly stopped Misan, then said to the beautiful woman, "Young miss, there might be a misunderstanding here. We are only passing through here. As for our destination, we want to reach the ancient lands." When the beautiful woman heard Li Yunmu's intention to go to the ancient lands, her complexion changed. It became much colder than before. "Arrest them for me. These people are clearly conspiring against our Feixue sect." Li Yunmu was somewhat dumbfounded. He had told them the truth, so why were they acting as if he was a heinous scoundrel? "They are responsible for defending the final checkpoint to the ancient lands, and you just showed them your hand, so of course they will target you," the system said. Li Yunmu wanted to explain himself again, but the beautiful woman didn't give him the chance to speak. The sword in her hand rushed forward to strike him. Li Yunmu was incomparably astonished when he saw it. The woman's sword technique was very familiar to him. It was clearly the technique used by sword sage, so how could the people of Feixue sect use it too? He pulled out the divine Cyan blade and fought against the people of Feixue sect. However, since his strength had taken a qualitative leap, the people of Feixue sect were not his opponent. After a few strikes, the disciples of Feixue sect were forced back by Li Yunmu's blade intent. Chapter 700, Feixue sect. The beautiful woman leading the group was known as S.H.A.D.W. When she saw Li Yunmu's skills, she immediately realized that the strangers would not be easy to deal with and that it would be best to inform the sect leader about their arrival. Otherwise, if the Central Emperor Mountain was defeated, the ancient lands would be in danger. Li Yunmu suddenly thought of a matter. The Central Emperor Mountain wasn't far from the Dragon Silk Palace, so why was the direction installed on the waver boat towards the Eastern Ocean? There was only one possibility, and that was that there was only one path to the ancient lands. All others were dead ends. After Li Yunmu realized it, he knew that he definitely had to enter the Central Emperor Mountain, or else he would be unable to enter the ancient lands. S.H.A.D.W led everyone in a hasty retreat. She wasn't Li Yunmu's opponent, so there was no point to stay around and continue to waste time. "Where are you going?" When Li Yunmu saw S.H.A.D.W depart, he couldn't help but shake his head. Misan coldly snorted. "What the hell are you still doing here? Why aren't you hurrying inside? Could it be that you want to allow them to continue obstructing your path?" Li Yunmu nodded and advanced toward the entrance to the ancient lands. But the people of Feixue sect were truly troublesome. S.H.A.D.W, who had fought against him previously, had found some helpers. The old men seemed to be profound experts of the sect, so could they be the backbone of Feixue sect? If Li Yunmu defeated the backbone of the Feixue sect, then wouldn't it completely destroy their honor? "We are going to the ancient lands and hope that seniors could be reasonable." The leading elder snorted coldly at him. "The gods are sleeping peacefully in the ancient lands, so how could people like you be allowed to enter the ancient lands? Kyungsu said that you possess pretty good strength. I want to see the basis of your confidence." Li Yunmu was just about to attack when Misan stopped him and said, "Let me deal with them, you quickly proceed toward the entrance to the ancient lands." Li Yunmu was slightly startled. When did Misan become so kind-hearted? He truly couldn't adapt to it. But since Misan had already said it, Li Yunmu knew that he better follow her advice. Yet he was quite afraid of letting Misan deal with the elders of Feixue sect by herself. "Sect leader, these two injured the disciples of my sect and still want to go to the ancient lands. I hope that you won't let them off easily," S.H.A.D.W coldly said. The sect leader twirled his beard and said without the slightest hesitation, "Capture them." Before his words could even fade away, the people of Feixue sect charged at Li Yunmu and Misan like a horde of feral horses without reins. Even when faced with so many people, Li Yunmu didn't think that it would be difficult to escape. However, Misan was by his side, and he could not just abandon her on the side. "Why aren't you leaving? I alone am enough to deal with them, you go quickly." Miss Anne shouted anxiously. After entering the strange new land, Miss Anne's aim could be considered to have been achieved. So right then, she was helping Li Yunmu achieve his aim. But Li Yunmu wasn't someone who could casually abandon his companions. If we have to leave, then we leave together. If we fight, then we fight together. Hearing Li Yunmu's words, Miss Anne felt a warm current rush through her heart for some reason. Her heart fluttered, but right then, it wasn't the time to let emotions affect her actions. She muttered an incantation, and Li Yunmu's body began to float away. He was unable to do anything, as if he had been bound by something. He was slightly startled and anxiously shouted, "What the hell are you doing? Are you crazy?" Miss Anne turned her head and said indifferently while looking at Li Yunmu, "It was great knowing you. And this is the only thing I can do for you. Leave." Li Yunmu. Li Yunmu rolled his eyes and furiously said, "Why are you acting like we're in a sad drama? These people aren't very formidable. At most, they have just entered the Sage Flux expert realm. Is it necessary to pretend that it's a matter of life and death?" But Li Yunmu, who was wrapped in a white halo, had already floated far away. He could not see how Miss Anne fared against those people, having already reached the vicinity of Crow Soul Valley. Miss Anne had delivered him there, or else he would have still be entangled with the people from Feixue Sect at the Central Emperor Mountain. Over there, Miss Anne was more than enough to deal with the Sage Flux experts of Feixue Sect. In a short time, all the disciples of Feixue Sect were lying on the ground in front of Miss Anne. On the white snow of Central Emperor Mountain, many disciples of Feixue Sect were unable to get up anymore. Feixue, who had just stopped Li Yunmu and Miss Anne, spat out blood. In the land of endless snow, Miss Anne had defeated the entire Feixue Sect by herself. This person, how high is her strength exactly? Feixue looked at Miss Anne with an incredulous gaze. Miss Anne walked away without turning her head back. When Li Yunmu reached the Crow Soul Valley, he discovered that it was extremely spacious. Moreover, it had an enchantment which he studied a few times but was unable to break. Miss Anne hurried over and said to Li Yunmu, "I have already dealt with them. I hadn't expected that it would be just as you said, they were only Sage Flux experts, not worthy of even being mentioned in front of me. What are you investigating? Still unable to enter the ancient lands?" Li Yunmu shook his head. "There's an enchantment just outside the Crow Soul Valley, it should have been installed by someone important. If we want to enter the ancient lands, we must go through a few barriers." Miss Anne patted Li Yunmu's shoulders, "This enchantment should be a piece of cake for you. Don't tell me that you can't do it. At that time, you even broke the enchantment of Whale City." Li Yunmu looked at Miss Anne with suspicion. "How do you know that?" Miss Anne smiled and said, "It's natural. At that time, my underworld serpent's intelligence was very formidable. Many powers hoped to collaborate with us, only you weren't eager to work with us." Li Yunmu calmly smiled, then his expression suddenly grew taut. "If we can't break this enchantment, we won't be able to enter the Crow Soul Valley, and then entering the ancient lands will only be a distant dream. I still have to save my parents, so I cannot continue dragging my feet." "You have parents?" A hint of a complex emotion suddenly appeared in Miss Anne's eyes.